Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. It is Friday. That means we got 5 things for you to watch. Coming up tomorrow, Penn State versus Illinois. Big Ten play starts, and the Nittany Lions are 2-0. Is this going to be a big game for Penn State, or is this going to be a game they can handle? There's a couple of variables and factors, as always, that go into that, and we'll get into some of the interesting nuances of what's happened to Illinois over the first 2 games of the season. As always, if you're watching the show, you're enjoying what we're doing here on the YouTube channel, please like the video, subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and if you're new here on the channel, please subscribe to the channel as well. We got a lot coming up, and I want to make sure we get to all of it. So there's more than 5 things each week that you're looking for. I try to distill this into maybe some of the interesting things that will be the big tectonic plates that shift throughout the game that decide how this one is going to go. Illinois does not look like they're in a good spot, coming at 1-1, struggling with Toledo, and then, of course, losing to Kansas in week 2. But that doesn't mean that they're a bad opponent. And that doesn't mean that they have no ability to challenge Penn State. There's some things they can do in this game. It'll be interesting to see how they play coming out of a situation where they may have to pivot. And that right there, that is where we're going to start with our 5 things to watch for.
Number 5.
By the way, if you have any questions you want to chat throughout the show, more than open to conversation here during the show, especially afterwards. If you have any questions, if there's anything you want to talk about, anything you feel like I skipped over, we'll be talking to you throughout the show. Keep the energy up. It's one of those days for me today where it's Friday, it's week 3. This is how you go 1-0 every week, right? Is you gotta put in the work every single day. So bring some energy, because apparently mine is a little slow out of the gates today. But let's get to number 5. I don't know that you can change your stripes overnight. You can in a playbook you have different sections. You don't practice just one thing. But you do choose each week what you're going to major in. What are the plays? What are the schemes? What are the things that you want to do against a certain opponent? And for Illinois, they have been, for the last year and a half, a very heavy man coverage team. That hasn't gone well this year, but really nothing has gone well on the coverage end for Illinois. Last week, Kansas did a great job of attacking individuals within the defense to get them one-on-one with athletes in space. And this is where Illinois was really good a year ago, of playing physical press coverage, shutting things down, and relying on their front 7 to do the work against the run. Now, it's not quite as good. So Tariq Barnes, let's look at him, middle linebacker. Over the season so far, 5 for 5. This is on targets that he's seen. 5 for 5, 83 yards, 1 touchdown, and a perfect NFL passer rating so far. Are you putting players like Barnes and Tyler Strain, players like that, in single coverage? Because Nick Singleton, Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren, these guys can make it a nightmare for the individuals in the secondary that are not the same level of players. So Illinois has Tavion Nichols, who's been good this year. He's their number 1 outside corner. He's number 3. Good football player. He's been targeted 3 times this year, and this is kind of the what you can choose to do if you are an offense, is you can avoid a best player on a team. The Penn State defense has seen some of the fewest targets through 2 weeks of the season of any college defense, and Kalen King has seen virtually no targets so far this year, just like 1 or 2 so far. Kind of in the same situation, but you can attack whoever you want. So in the lead up to this Penn State game, Tyler Strain, Xavier Scott, and Tariq Barnes have been the major target receivers for Illinois, and those are the guys that have struggled so far. Now, Scott is interesting. Xavier Scott is the guy that Penn State head coach James Franklin singled out as a good football player. He's their slot defender, good run defender. He's been targeted 13 times so far this season, allowed 5 receptions for 58 yards. Strain, 3 receptions for 48 yards. This is, and Barnes, 3 receptions, 46 yards, and a touchdown. All of this was last week against Kansas. So, like we said, this is what happened last week with Kansas found a way to exploit the guys they wanted to target and avoid the guys that they didn't want to go near. So, how does Penn State play that? That's going to be something interesting to me that we get to just a little bit on the show of how does Penn State play this? Do they attack different parts of the defense for Illinois, or do they how do you, I guess what I'm trying to say is Kansas put a clear blueprint on film last Saturday. Do you do the same thing? Do you go, okay, well, let's see if they can stop it again? Or do you try to adapt that knowing surely Illinois isn't going to do the same thing over and over and over again? And that's where man coverage versus zone coverage comes in. They want to play cover one, especially on third down and in high leverage situations. After the first 2 weeks, that hasn't worked great. But nothing in coverage has really worked well. If you look at their overall coverage numbers, they're giving up yards in man, in zone, cover one, cover three. It doesn't really matter. So can they and will they change and go with more zone rather than man coverage this week? Penn State's got to be prepared for both because they do both. Nobody does just one thing. But what are you looking for in this particular game? So let's get to number 4 because I don't have a good answer for you there in terms of are they going to play man or zone. My thinking here is eventually you're going to lean on what you want to do, and that is they want to play press man coverage, and that's going to be interesting to see. It could be a good test to see if Penn State's running backs, their tight ends, can get individual coverage against those players that Penn State is trying to target on the middle of the field, or can Illinois rise to the occasion. Coming up at number 4, though, we're going to look specifically at the quarterback.
Number 4.
So this is just kind of a question about Penn State's defense from week 1 to week 2. Tackling early in the season is always an issue, and we saw Penn State struggle in week 1, but then bounce back in the second week of the season. That's going to be something really important to keep Illinois behind the chains is Luke Altmyer is an athletic quarterback. He can run. He can get out of the pocket. Kansas didn't allow him to do that during the game portion of the game last week when they were behind and he was trying to pass and they were trying to get plays through the air. He was stuck in the pocket. They got pressure on him, but they also didn't allow him to get outside. That's been something that Penn State has struggled with this year so far. And when players got into the open field in week 1, 13 missed tackles and 56 scramble yards from the quarterback. So that's something that Penn State knew about, they worked on, and they tried to clean up. Now, Delaware, a very different team. A different team in week 2 that has different skills, a different style of passer, and you can see 2 missed tackles and only 5 scramble yards from the quarterback. It's also Delaware, right? So you expect Penn State to be very good in that situation. Luke Altmyer is a similar quarterback in terms of athleticism, maybe even a little bit more explosive than Garrett Green in week 1. So is Penn State going to be able to play contain? And that means defensive ends continuing to keep the quarterback in the pocket. Your rush lanes have to be good. And you have to, something we're going to get to a little bit later, you want a certain style of rush. There's a couple things you can't do, which is get too far upfield and allow guys to get out into open space. That's been something that Penn State has struggled with through the first game of the season, where missed tackles in open space and the defensive line in terms of who's got contain on the quarterback in the pocket, because there were a couple of times Abdul Carter and Hakeem Beamon were on stunts coming to the outside the pocket, right? So they are coming from the inside out, and they're the guys that are supposed to get the clean up, easy sack after the quarterback is flushed out of the pocket. They weren't able to do that in that situation. Are they more gap sound this week? Then we get into the run game, where everyone wants to know, is Penn State's front ready to go against Illinois? Shades of 2021, this is not the same Illinois offense. The offensive line, consistency across the board is a problem for them. They have some good moments. They have some ability to create problems for Penn State's defense. Penn State's defense is not in their gaps. But in terms of explosive playmakers, The running backs don't have the same pop. They don't have the same explosiveness that you want from the running game, and that's where Altmaier brings that athleticism into the backfield, right? They have the ability to move the chains. So don't give them that ability, right? Stay in your gaps. The thing that we've talked about all season long and before in the preseason, can you play together and can you make everything right? This is something to watch early in the game as well. Talking to Curtis Jacobs Wednesday after practice, one of the things he talked about is the defensive line is going to make their plays, and then the linebackers have to adjust and make them right. So this is something we've been talking about with the Penn State front seven is they do so many complicated things up front. It's almost impossible to hit your target every single time on every single play. And the linebackers, their job is to adjust and adapt. And if Illinois is doing things early in the game that cause them issues, communication between drives and communication between plays is something that they have to make sure that they're buttoned up on. We've seen on film before, even when the veterans on this team make mistakes, they adjust even before they go to the sideline. So keeping contained on this offense, I think that's number 4 here, but it's probably number 1 when it comes to playing the Illinois offense is making sure that if you're not in your gap, you get in your gap next time. And if somebody else isn't in their gap, you have to adjust and adapt, especially up front where they're just all, it is so hard to watch this defense sometimes in terms of understanding on film what was meant to happen and what happened during the play. And that's something that, obviously Penn State understands and they're cleaning up. James Franklin happy with his team in terms of missed assignments from week 1 to week 2. Again, it's Delaware. There's going to be a different level of challenge back to something similar to what West Virginia brought to the table. And this offense is not as good in certain aspects as the West Virginia offensive line. The West Virginia offensive line from left to right, they were a cohesive unit. They played really well together. They had a really smart rushing attack. There's elements of that. There's a good plan of attack here. It's a bit more traditional in terms of we're going to hit certain guideposts of this is a Brett Bielema offense. There's not as many adjustments and wrinkles, and it's more we're going to do what we do instead of like trying to have multiple layers in the offense to counter what we expect you to do. So there's a lot of, traditional zone, counter off of that, and then, kind of that basic running package that we've seen from teams so far in that particular mold. They're going to be similar to West Virginia in the style of attack, but then it's going to be about the level of play, especially on the right side of the offensive line where they're not quite as strong. So this particular group, I think that's going to be a big part of this game, is Penn State and that defensive matchup. Is Penn State bigger and more athletic and ready to take advantage of those weaknesses? Or are they going to give up some mental errors and allow Illinois to run the ball and get into consistent yardage where they can keep themselves ahead of the sticks? And we're going to get into that a little bit later as well when it comes to the pass attack and how I think you derail what Illinois wants to do. Before we go any further, I want to tell you about today's sponsor of the show, and that is, if you've been watching lately, Caldera Labs. They are a men's skincare product line that want to help you age gracefully. There's a lot of stuff out there in the world that is trying to poison you, as I've found. Toxins, VOCs, CFCs, CFLs, HOAs, IRS. I don't know. There's a lot of chemicals out there in the world. There's a lot of things that are going to and want to attack your body. And if you want to make sure that you don't have all of those on your skin from day to day, try the Clean Slate from Caldera Labs. They are a men's skincare line, as I said, that provide premium products that will help you age gracefully. And not even just age gracefully, just take care of yourself the proper way of making sure that you aren't just allowing gunk from your life to just build up on your skin. Clinical trials have found that 94% of men's skin showed a overall younger-looking appearance after using Caldera Lab. So this is something that is not just an anecdote thing. This is there's science behind this. There is medical testing behind these things, and they have the serum, the Icon. So this is the one I was talking about. Their Icon serum. It addresses the most common skin concerns around the eye: fine lines, dark circles, and puffiness. And if you look at my face today, I used it today. I have significantly less of those. I have found, having actually used this stuff, it works. So check out Caldera Labs and use the promo code BWI. When you use the promo code BWI with Caldera Labs, you get 20% off. BWI, use promo code BWI23 to get 20% off with promo code BWI23. So check out Caldera Labs. Going here into the chat. Mike says, don't feel this is a trap game with Illinois' dreadful start. Hope I'm not blinded by the shiny new version of PSU football. More confident in this version's focus and ability to be multidimensional. Offensively, absolutely. There's some interesting things here. And by the way, appreciate Michael here. Appreciate everyone on the show today. I'm just going to stop for a second and address something. I'm totally off my game today. I hope it looks like I'm coming through and then we're having a strong show, but I am totally off my game today. So appreciate everyone here in the chat providing some support when, maybe it's 2nd and 13 for me to start the show today. House of Class says, I'll take elite pass blocking left tackle over elite run blocker all day. Olu is decent in run blocking, though it's not like he sucks at it. This is something we're going to address at the end when we get to number 1, because I'm very fascinated, not necessarily by Olu specifically, but the conversation here in the chat has been something we addressed yesterday that has been on other Penn State football video breakdowns. Olu's run blocking has not lived up to top 5 billing of elite offensive tackle in the country. That's fine. I kind of agree with House of Class here in terms of I'd rather an elite pass protector at that position than an elite run blocker. You'd love to have both. I think Olu is capable of both. This is a good test to find that out. But let's get to number 3 on our countdown of the things we're...
Number 3.
Okay, I'm warming up. Literally, I'm cold. My wife refuses to let me turn the heat on. I didn't turn my studio lights on, so I'm like shivering while trying to talk to you today, and it is completely throwing me off my game. But let's get into what I think is the most interesting part about this game from a schematic standpoint. How is Penn State going to attack the Illinois rushing game and their rush defense? Everyone knows Jer'Zahn, Newton, and that front 4, and really front 3, the 3 defensive linemen in the interior, are the strength of the team. How is Penn State going to attack that? Are they going to go 11 personnel and spread out to run, or are they going to go like they did last week and go 12 personnel and force Illinois' other defenders to get into the run game? Now, against Delaware, they were able to bully the edges of the defensive line. They were able to get into the secondary with their tight ends. This is a better team. Shocker, right? So are you going to be able to physically dominate those situations, or do you want to bring 3 receivers on the field and spread this team out to run? So a lot of the things that Kansas did to get so many rushing yards on Illinois, they spread them out. And sometimes they were in 12 personnel, but they spread them out by running laterally, attacking the edges, the edge defenders. So they run a 3-down front. Illinois runs a 3-down front with 2 outside linebackers, right? Traditional 5-man defensive line. They essentially just opted to not run through the middle of the Illinois defense. There were maybe 1 or 2 times where they ran actually like inside zone action or man action into between the tackles. They ran a lot of quarterback option, pitches, and a lot of lateral sideline to sideline, making these guys, especially at the second level, run. Penn State doesn't have a quarterback that can do that in particular in terms of the option play and the quarterback running threat, putting edge defenders in conflict. And I don't think Penn State wants to do that. But what version of attacking the edges of this defense are they going to use? Are they going to use what they did last week, which was a similar style of defense? Not the exact same, but a similar style. They're going to go 2 tight ends, condense the formation, and try to attack the corners. This is a team built on... These guys can tackle. So they're a bigger, more physical defense. That's what they want to do. They want to get downhill. They want to play physical in the run. They want their corners to be a part of it. They want to cover, and they want to take everything away from you. if you put those linebackers in space, that's where they get in trouble. So can Penn State run laterally on this team? And that's going to be my biggest question. And then when it comes to attacking them in the passing game and playing off of that, because once they got Illinois running laterally, talking again about Kansas, they were able to then attack vertically because they were spreading the defense out, and those interior defenders are not great. We talked about Tyreek Barnes and how he's not a great coverage linebacker. Neither of their linebackers are good coverage linebackers. That's where every team is going to attack. So is Penn State going to try and condense the formation and then get a middle linebacker on Nick Singleton? Or are they going to put 3 receivers out there and try to get Keandre Lambert-Smith on a safety? You're going to see both, but what's the percentage this week? Because we've seen Penn State predominantly play 2 tight ends. I think that's playing into the strength of the Illinois defense if you condense the formation. If you spread them out wide and you try and run around the edges, outside zone I think should be a big part of this game. Some of the other things that they've done in the past where they've used man concepts, but they've changed the angle and the launch point, so you're not aiming at the A gap, you're aiming at the C gap. I think some of those things in this game might be a big part of what Penn State tries to do. C. Paul King here in the chat, he says, I love the look of 12 personnel. Seems that it's almost guarantees positive yardage on early downs. So far this season, yes. This particular defense, Jer'Zahn Newton, they move him all over the defense. And that would be the concern is, does he individually wreck your game plan in the run game? Because he's a guy that is capable of doing that. How you run at him, around him, or force him into conflict, Kansas did a great job of that. And I put these out of order because the number one thing, you guys are getting to it early in the chat, is like getting to how does Penn State attack this particular front. Kevin says, do you use Bo Pribula? If there was a week for Penn State to use Bo Pribula, it would be this week. It would be using him in that situation in a package for him. C. Paul King says, should definitely have a package for Bo. Haven't seen that any of this year. Maybe saving it until they really need it. And that's the question. Do they really need it this week? Or are they going to save certain things for later? I don't believe teams are going to save things. James Franklin talked about putting things on tape that other teams have to worry about. So Bo Pribula running their read option game in the third quarter and seeing how effective he is at it, that's putting that on tape. So let's get to number 2 in our countdown of how Penn State attacks Illinois.
Number 2.
At a certain point this year, Penn State stars need to show up. They have played an egalitarian defense, right? Everyone is a part of the success. Hopefully I used egalitarian in the proper sense there. But here's my point. Adisa Isaac, Chop Robinson. I think fans have pointed out they have not been a part of the conversation very much this year. They have 4 total pressures between the 2 of them through 2 games. Teams are taking them away in pass rushing situations, obvious passing situations. They're getting double teams and chips. But at a certain point, your stars have to be your stars. And it shouldn't always be that they have to rush around the outside, right? You should be able to rush certain offensive linemen, either inside, outside, bull rush, have multidimensional moves that get you quick wins. And that's what I'm looking for in this game, is not necessarily that they get sacks, but how they get pressure. This is an offensive line in passing situations that gives up quick pressures, immediate losses. Penn State has, the last 2 games, seen a passing attack that has not held on to the football. Screens, quick passes, and quick decisions to go deep. Designed deep passes where the quarterback kind of just launches and throws right after the snap, giving his, not waiting for routes to develop downfield, just go balls where you're looking for timing and placement of the football in man-to-man coverage situations. So there hasn't been as much work for the defensive ends, but there should be in this game. There should be quick wins, elite pressures for especially Chop Robinson and Dennis Sutton if they're rushing off that right side. That's, at a certain point, that has to come up because Penn State's going to need that against other Big Ten teams later in the year where you have dominance from certain positions. We have seen Chop Robinson especially, and I want to give him a shout out for doing dirty work to get other guys free. And if you're going to chip and you're going to use your running backs and your tight ends to attack the edge rushers, that has left Abdul Carter open in the middle to attack up the middle of the defense. And we saw that against West Virginia. He had 5 pressures, 2 sacks, 1 sack, or 2 hits, something like that. So he's had an effect. Penn State has found a way around that. You have 5 pressures, a sack, and 2 hits. There are answers if these guys don't get pressure, but you do want to see them get it at a certain point. Kind of like we haven't seen the secondary get many interceptions. Are those guys, who's going to be the next ball hawk? They have had no opportunities to do so. Somebody asked me recently, what have you seen from Cam Miller? I was like, I haven't seen anything. They haven't thrown. Nobody's thrown on Penn State so far this year. It's hard to really get an understanding of what they're able to do. So another thing about this situation and getting pressure is absolutely critical for this particular game. Because you look at Luke Altmaier in the first game versus the second game, and the clear difference was Toledo didn't get pressure on him. And Altmaier is kind of a traditional college quarterback. First read, if it's there and he throws it, strong arm, good zip on the ball, gets the ball into the window, into tight coverage. He can operate that way. But this offense against Kansas, when Kansas got pressure regularly, he was 3 of 13 and had a passer rating like of 50 or something like that. So getting pressure is absolutely critical to getting this team off schedule. It starts with the run game. Absolutely. It starts with the run game and making sure you can get them in situations where they can't use RPOs and they can't use screens and they can't use all the parts of their passing attack that are a part of a run-first team's mentality, because this is a run-first team. They don't want to lean on the passing attack. They're not trying to throw the ball down the field, and that's what the game script happened when Kansas got ahead, right? And that's a huge part of this is don't go 3 and out on offense and make them chase you on the scoreboard, because the minute that the game pressure puts the load on Altmaier's shoulders to make multiple reads, get past his first progression, give him things he hasn't seen before, he tends to lock up like a lot of college quarterbacks. So don't give them the obvious answer. Penn State likes to play press man coverage, and they have the athletes to shut down most passing attacks. But sometimes it's not necessarily about shutting a team down with your skill. It's about forcing the other team to do something they're not good at. And making Altmaier make full field reads or get to his second read, that's going to cause him to drop his eyes and try to run, which is why contain is where we started, because you want to make this quarterback stay in the pocket, and Kansas didn't allow him to get out and use his legs as a threat during the competitive portion of the game. So if he's kept clean and they throw quick screens and Penn State isn't ready for all of those things, which they will be, this offense can stay on schedule. They can cause some problems because he's got a good arm. He can throw the full field, but when the game pressure is on, they simplify the offense. They give him simple reads, and he doesn't necessarily get to the next thing and the next thing. And that's where Drew Aller shines, and that's why he's kind of a different player on the college football level. Stephen Light says, the stars will shine tomorrow. And I think that's something that if you're going to play tight coverage, your slot corners, your linebackers all have to be on key. So you don't want to give Illinois your middle linebacker versus a running back in a situation where they've designed a screen or a slant pass or man coverage rub routes and give them open throws to get 6 yards and get them back on schedule. So contain and then force the ball in the quarterback's hands. It's the same script as every week for Penn State's defense, but with this particular team, kind of like in week 1, if you can keep them away from schedule, they have a hard time of really operating the offense in a functional way, which is why it was shut down for a good portion of the first half. Okay, so let's get to number 1. Let's put kind of a capstone on all of this, and we'll have a conversation about the game, because this is my biggest question about this particular team and what I think Penn State's mentality might be.
Number 1.
So we talked about how Kansas attacked this defense and how they avoided running in the middle. Is Penn State going to do that? Penn State, are they going to try and play big boy football against a defense designed to take away big boy football? Not only is it that they have the strength of the team on the interior with Newton and the rest of the guys up front, but they also, again, they play a 3-down front. They have those big physical middle linebackers that are keyed up to take away runs between the tackles. But Penn State has some guys that have shown they can maul. They can mix it up. It's going to be strength on strength with J.B. Nelson and what we've seen from Caden Wallace and his next level strength in terms of getting into double teams and down blocks and making a physical impact and moving guys off the football. The offensive line has not been perfect in terms of getting to all of their blocks, and there have been some areas where they could clean it up, where Penn State hasn't had explosive runs because you haven't given Nick Singleton and Katron Allen a takeoff path like a fighter jet, right? They've had some rocks and some stuff in the way that has prevented them from having a clear run at the safety on a bunch of plays. So those explosive runs haven't been there, but the yardage and the efficiency, James Franklin talking about efficiency, they've moved guys off the ball. They've been able to get that vertical push. Can they do that enough times against this defense? Because I think Penn State wants to play with their classic pocket quarterback, and Drew Aller is going to run some in this game. It's got to be a part of it to keep the defense honest. But does Penn State just play straight up and not try to find a wrinkle to go around the immovable object? Because they have a massive offensive line. They're averaging like 320 pounds up front. So what's all that beef for? Are you going to see something from Caden Wallace this week and from J.B. Nelson and from the tight ends that says, we are more physical than the team whose whole identity is physicality? I'm interested in that particular attack, because if Penn State wins that way, that's a statement. That's a statement for the rest of the Big Ten and for college football that this is going to be a dangerous team throughout the college football season. For real. They've got many, many ways they can beat you, including smash mouth football with a quarterback that sees the whole field. And then from Caden Wallace's perspective and from a pass protection standpoint, Jer'Zahn Newton has 7 pressures and 2 sacks so far this year. For a 295-pound guy that looks like he's 320, he's just a massive individual that moves really well. How do they contend with him? How do they play him as a pass rusher? Because on early downs, he's going to line up, head up, or just inside a tackle. He's going to go against tackles and guards in the run game. In the pass game, they're going to line him up inside, and they're going to line him up all over the front and try to find the weakness of the Penn State offensive line. So is J.B. Nelson ready to go in terms of where his pass protection development is so far? Then Salim Wormley, that right side, and the interior in general so far this year has struggled with pass protection and stunts and slants, and I would absolutely expect that Illinois is going to try the same thing. They're going to use some twists up front and bringing Newton around the horn up the A-gap across the center and see if they can get a free rush at the quarterback, because Drew Aller's been great in pocket mobility. This is just another level of a test from that perspective. And then from Caden Wallace specifically, he hasn't seen an elite speed rusher this year, a guy that's a NFL draft pick, first round conversation point. He will later this year. But he also hasn't seen speed specifically. He won't see it this week, but there's power and there's strength up front for Illinois. So how does he contend with those situations? Because we've seen hot and cold from him. West Virginia did not attack the tackles. They attacked the interior of the offensive line, but he performed well in those situations. And then against Delaware, he allowed 3 bad pressures and had an average Caden Wallace day, which is hot and cold, good stuff, and then some, what you did. We all saw it. We know what you did. We don't need to go deep into it. But that's going to be a big part of this game is, does the Penn State offensive line have that next gear to take this game and make it about them and their progress and everything that Penn State fans have wanted. Because if that's the case, this game becomes very easy for the Nittany Lions. That's you overcome the strength of this defense, which is the front three, front five, the big, strong 265-pound defensive ends, the 305-pound defensive tackles, and then suddenly you get what you want from this defense because they have to adjust. And that's really what happened with Kansas is they got what they wanted in the run game. Those plays started working, and then the adjustments that they made, they were systematically attacking Illinois based off of every part of their game plan. So if step A doesn't work, then B won't work as well. And you're kind of then trying to find the thing that works instead of having the cohesive game plan that you brought in, that particular attack work. So let's review. Penn State coming into this game is Illinois going to play man or zone? Because man hasn't been working. Their coverage in the secondary hasn't been great anyway. So how do they adjust this week, and what should Penn State prepare for? I still think that they're going to lean on what they know in high leverage situations, but they may play much more zone than we're used to. Contain the quarterback, keep him in the pocket, contain the running game, don't allow them easy yardage, make them work for all those yards. They may still get them, they may still win, but don't give them anything easy. How do you attack the front five? 3 or 11 personnel or 12 personnel? Condense or spread to run? That's going to be a question all year long. And then from there, what do you use those guys in the passing attack to do? And that's where, kind of coming back to number one, these two are linked. If you can run on Illinois in 11 personnel, they have very few answers in terms of guys that can cover and play the run and play all that extra space. If Penn State can't do that and they have to rely on 12 personnel and 2 tight ends, I think we're going to see similar to what we've seen with big play action passes, max protect, and 2 or 3 man routes. But I think ideally you'd like to put it on film. Hey, we can spread an attack with 3 receivers, Keandre Lambert-Smith lining up everywhere, and get them on their heels. Number 2, defensive ends got to play an elite game. They've got to come in and dominate. There is the ability, I would say even on the interior, to get quick wins and pressure, which we haven't seen from Penn State in a while. So that will help shut down and if you do contain and you early down, you get your success, then your pass rushers have to be your pass rushers. And then finally, how are you going to play this team, and do we see a step forward from the Penn State offensive line? So that's what I got. You guys have any questions? You want to go through anything else? Anything you want to know? C. Paul King says Jameel Lyons looked really good when on the field. Will he get more time in upcoming weeks? BWI has... yes, Jameel Lyons had the best hit in the Delaware game for sure. I don't know that he sees a lot in this particular game. One thing that we didn't cover today that we've talked about on the show yesterday, and then, of course, at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, Amin Vanover maybe is returning. We saw him at practice for the first time. Maybe he's here this week. Maybe he isn't. And now you're trying to figure out how to get Zariah Fisher on the field. If it's a blowout, yes. But if you're saying, does Jameel Lyons work into the 2 deep? No, I don't think that that's the particular... that's not the particular game script for him going forward. I think he's a guy that they want to get experience. They want to get him as comfortable as possible. He might burn his red shirt, but we're not talking about him like Denai Dennis Sutton last year. And with the return of some defensive linemen, maybe this week, that might be something that you're not going to see unless it's a game like UMass. So in a couple of weeks, sure, but I wouldn't pin him as somebody who is working his way into the 2 deep. Fishboy asks, who might make the travel roster that we don't necessarily expect to? I don't know about the travel roster in terms of guys that go, but guys that might play that are on the travel roster we might not expect. Looking at the linebackers and safeties, I think there's some interesting things going on. And what I'll say is some of the stuff that watching the film from last week, go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We had a conversation about this on the message board thread about the Sam position, linebackers, safeties. I think there's some interesting things there that we're learning a little bit more about what this young class of 2023 has done to the overall depth and where they're moving guys around on the roster. That's a really good question, though, and I'm curious to know I want to know the answer to that too. Because I think that there's some stuff going on behind the scenes. Some guy says, part of me wants to just dominate this game and have a very simple offense. The other part wants Yurcich to open the playbook, give us a taste of the evil genius for the year. So this is a great point, and this is kind of the 11 or 12 personnel conversation. The passing game and where they attack and how they attack. Penn State has the horses. They have the quarterback to attack the full field. You're going to see that in the game, but then it becomes what percentage of, are they going to lean on Drew Aller and avoid running the ball as the primary plan on Saturday, or are they going to attack in a different way? It's easier to attack with 3 receivers than 2 tight ends, even if they're good tight ends and really good. The fastest tight end, Theo Johnson, is one of the slowest wide receivers on the team. The fastest wide receivers create dynamic issues with the passing attack of stretching zones, getting into places that other teams can't react to in time, and creating bigger windows for the quarterback. So does your offensive line hold up against 1 or 2 excellent football players that can wreck the game? Because if he can't stand in the pocket or he can't step into the pocket, and that's a big thing with a dominant defensive tackle, it's harder to step in the pocket if the pressure's coming from the interior. You can still roll out. You can still find different ways to get around that pressure, but Newton could absolutely break down a passing attack quickly and get you in negative yardage. And that's a thing about this, and Fitz made this point last show on Thursday that I think was very good. Kind of like the same thing with West Virginia. Don't go 3 and out and get those front defensive tackles tired. Once they're off the field, you can do what you want. The depth is not good, so you can run inside zone on the second drive if the starting defensive tackles aren't out there because their depth is not as stout. So how do you attack, and how does that create issues for the other team? Because even if they don't get explosive plays, but once again they're methodical, they stay on the field, that's going to cause some massive issues for Illinois. Grubby421 says, Drew hasn't taken many deep shots so far. Is this him being conservative, risk-averse, or should he be taking more shots downfield? I would... The last 2 teams, by their nature, have been conservative and kept a safety in the middle of the field or kept 4 deep in order to limit the explosive plays. Penn State still got explosive plays in the first game. Against Delaware... Literally, they kept sometimes 4 safeties, 5 safeties deep, and just played with coverages that they were disciplined to not bite on things and open up voids and bust coverage. So were there plays that Drew Aller could have made that would have been more explosive in the passing game? Yes. He missed a couple of throws, but overall, he made the right decisions, and the right decisions were throw it underneath and let your athletes be athletes against Delaware. So I want to say no, he's not being conservative. That was what last week especially, and we always react to the last thing that happened, right? The last thing that happened was Delaware played, and I know that you want to say it's Delaware, you should get whatever you want, but they aren't a bad team, and you don't throw into double coverage or into windows that aren't actually there just because it's Delaware. He was doing the things that the quarterback is supposed to do in that situation, and you saw when they went to more aggressive coverages where they kept fewer players out in pass defense and they blitzed, or they played more traditional coverages without free defenders wherever they wanted to place them. Drew Aller shredded the defense on that 2-minute drill. So I don't think that's the issue. And then it becomes, like we talked about in this game, are we going to see opportunities for him to take shots? Because if Illinois is playing 3 deep coverages, they're playing off coverages, not allowing Keandre Lambert-Smith, Trey Wallace, Malik McClain to get deep, then I do think that this is in a situation where you will see a conservative version, because that seems to be the kind of what teams want to do to Penn State, is make your sophomore quarterback continue to make decisions. But the thing we're learning is that he can make those decisions and keep you on the field. There was a question here earlier in the chat that I didn't get to right away, but I want to get to, and this is generally the point of the question is, Kelvin Davidson says, I hope to get the running backs and tight ends involved. If Penn State is smart, and they are going to try and get the tight ends, I think especially Theo Johnson, singled up aggressively down the seam against a defender. one of those middle defenders, whether it's a slot corner, the linebackers we talked about. I think him against the will linebacker for Illinois is an extreme mismatch. And then find a way to manipulate the safety and get an explosive play to the tight ends down the seam. This is a game that can happen. If they're playing soft zone coverages, it's going to be the same thing you've seen where maybe they'll get them underneath targets and try to get them to run through, in that first line of defense. But I think that this particular game, because the nature of Illinois is to want to play a single high defense, stack the box, and take away your run game, there are the opportunities for those tight ends to make explosive plays where there hasn't necessarily been as easy of a situation, especially in week 1 where they planned on keeping guys in to block and max protect. So that's where I think the tight ends haven't seen as many targets as, Theo Johnson not having as many targets. He's been asked to do other things, run block and pass protect, because of the situational aspects of the last 2 defenses they faced. This is a situation where they could absolutely find themselves targeting the tight ends quite a bit. Michael says, Bo in the wing T, call it T Frank. I don't want to take Drew Aller off the field at any point. So let me say that. I don't want to take Drew Aller off the field because the most efficient way of moving the football is having him throw it. And losing that, the danger of that is a limiting factor. You have now limited your offense. But somebody else said I wanted to see a 3 quarterback package. What if you had 2 of them out there? I'm not saying the whole game, but let's say it's the third quarter, you're up 21-7, and suddenly Bo Pribula is out there, and he gives you the option element, and you still. These never work, by the way. What I'm drawing up, what I'm talking to you about, these never. A rolling pocket where you've got Bo Pribula, and then on the backside, Drew Aller is an option. It never works, but it's always fun to think about more than anything. So I think that's the game, really. We've covered the main elements of this so far. David is back. He says 2023 Big Ten champ Steve Frank. He's always here with that positivity for Penn State football fans. So I've gotten off my chest what I wanted to talk about. I think the biggest thing is keeping Luke Altmaier off schedule. That's going to be something that Penn State should be able to do. And when you do that, it becomes a situation where there aren't a lot of answers left for Illinois other than guys making plays and some freak mistakes and getting him in space and attacking that way. So that is today's show. We will be back tomorrow to break everything down further on the Penn State Tailgate Show. You can check that out here on the Blue Whale Illustrated YouTube channel. And, of course, Seven Mountains Media, 99.5 The Bus. And I promise you, for everyone that's watched the Tailgate, I want to thank you for helping get us through the first 2 weeks with our audio issues. I promise you have crystal clear audio because we're broadcasting from the studio tomorrow. There's no way around us having really good audio on the stream tomorrow. So that's coming up. Hope you check that out. And, of course, the post-game show coming up after that. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Big day for Penn State football. Big day for Blue White Illustrated coverage. Sign up right now, bluewhiteillustrated.com. We'll see you then.